Can't get it to come on. Okay, guys, we're going to begin. Going to call this meeting to order. I apologize. We are starting right on time, believe it or not. Most of us have been running to meetings back to back. I had 3 at one time a moment ago. It's just hectic. So we are going to call this meeting to order, and we're going to begin with consideration of House Bill 309. All of you should have that bill with that LC number 9295 in your packet. And Representative Cooper, the floor is yours. Oh, hold on one second. Podium.
Hi.
You should be on now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do bring you the House Bill 309. I got a call from the department. If you remember, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we had a couple of assisted living in different places that all of a sudden closed their doors, giving the patients that lived there and thought they would be living there for the rest of their lives less than 30 days notice to find another place to live because they were no longer financially viable. And so we wanted to make sure that we had, before somebody started one and was okayed by the state, that there was proof that they had the financial backing to be, as much as we can tell and the proof that we could get, that they should be able to keep their facility running. In that, what we did with that, we asked the CPAs to get and sign an affidavit that after reviewing the books and the proposal that they were making and their financials, that they would sign a 2-year affidavit certifying that these people were financially stable enough to be allowed to continue and open a place. What happened is the CPAs can only give a 1-year okay, and it has to be in the negative. They can't certify that it's going to be okay. They can only say it looks like they're not going to, that they're going to have enough, but really they can't certify that it's going forward. So the department became aware of this, and they asked me to bring this bill, which just gives another way for us and corrects what was wrong and gives us another way to try to make sure that if you're going to open an assisted living and a memory care unit and all, that you have the financial stability as best can be told to keep it running. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and I want to any members, please feel free to let me know if you need to ask a question. I want to begin with a question that maybe, I know you have Joe Hood with you today from the department, and we can ask him as well. But so to make sure that I'm clear and those the rest of us here, so if someone's going to operate, in this case, an assisted living community, sorry for the siren, we'll let it pass. So if someone's going to operate an assisted living community and they're caring for frail seniors and others that may have disabilities, and they're hiring a large number of employees, if they do not have the financial wherewithal to ensure that they can provide care, make payroll, all the things that are necessary to make sure that people show up to provide the care necessary, it could be a real safety threat. That's generally what we're talking about here, Representative and Mr. Hood?
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, especially in a memory care unit, people are in the very last stages of their life and need extreme amount of care if they've forgotten how to eat and they're losing some of their mobility. And so certainly, and anyone, the average age, we thought when assisted living, we came up with this assisted living category, which I was here and involved when we did that, because before we only had nursing homes. We thought that it would be younger seniors, in their 70s and so forth, that would move into these facilities. No, the average age is about 85. And so when somebody 85, 84, they move into one of these facilities, they don't want to move again. They're moving and thinking it's their last home. So yes, and then a lot of them are full. I know the pandemic has changed that a little bit, but before that, and it was hard to find one that they selected, and like one closed, and the people had paid for the month at $4,000 or $5,000 for their monthly fee, and they closed in like the first couple of days and said they were closing and didn't refund that money. And for some seniors, that's the only, they're on very tight budgets, and they lost that money.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Hood, have there been some examples where the lack of this provision created some difficult situations for Georgians maybe who needing care?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What happens is, the department didn't have prior to this discretion to review financials for a formation of a company. So, you could have the formation of an LLC, for example, for a brand new company. They might not have financial backing. There was no requirement that there be a review. So this gave us the opportunity to add that on change of ownership and on new entrants into the market.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a question from Representative LaHood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm in support of this bill. So thank you for bringing it, Chair Lady Cooper. And appreciate your input, Mr. Hood. So I think my only question that I might ask Mr. Hood to speak to for clarity is on lines 39 and 40, where it says that essentially the department in its own discretion will determine the financial stability of the applicant.
Yes. So there was some question that Chairman LaHood and I had discussed previously about why the department would have discretion in this regard as stated here. And part of that is there is the opportunity that we've run across where there will be a new entrant in, and they may not have financials that meet what was put forward in the original statute, and we may have to go to pro forma financials, or if it's a subsidiary of a larger company, the department would like the flexibility to consider that backing is sufficient and that they're going to be able to meet those obligations. This discretion language gives us that flexibility to make that determination and agree that we could accept that affidavit by that CPA. Without that, we have some fear that we would have a narrow definition and we would have a harder time of letting change of ownerships and new entrants come in.
So thank you. And just for clarity, the spirit of this is to keep things moving smoothly and to not let this be something that holds up an application, for months or even years in some cases, but that this gives the department flexibility to make decisions
Yes,
quicker.
Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely what we're after here, is to have a standard that a CPA can certify to financials that would be clear across the industry that we could accept. And we feel like, that we'll be able just to put forth an affidavit, and if there are times where we need to deviate from that because of circumstances on formation or what have you, then we would be able to consider that and have that independent CPA giving us that opinion to back that up, and then we would be able to accept that with the discretion language.
Thank you.
Representative Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Cooper, for bringing this forward. I certainly appreciate the work that was done previously and the intention to care for our seniors. I had a similar question around the vagueness of the twice referenced own discretion, and in hearing your discussion just now, that was on line 40, but also on line 20. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to amend the bill to establish at least some financial thresholds that would also allow discretion but give greater clarity to the solvency or the predictability that the original bill was intending to provide.
So if that's directed at me, I'd be happy to. From the
whoever-
department standpoint, I think one of the challenges that we have with setting a threshold in statute is the scope and size of the various facilities that come forward. We're dealing in some instances with very small facilities and with some instances very large facilities, and those thresholds would, in statute per se, would be hard for us to, in some instances, present challenges, for the industry. So that would be my concern in putting that in statute. If there were suggestions that there's a challenge, if there's a problem that we really identify, the department would take that upon rulemaking to try and address that. We've recently done that in different instances with personal care homes, nursing homes, and hospitals, where we have the flexibility in rulemaking. We try and address it there.
Would you allow one more question? Thank you, Chairman. Hearing that response, I have a follow-on question, which is, again, maybe are there other best practices in industries where we are looking at enterprises of differing scale and scope, where there is a generalized threshold for financial stability? So I understand ranges. Is there something where we could establish ranges that, again, would move it from just completely open-ended to get back to what I think was the original intention of the bill?
I don't know that we don't have a suggestion from the department standpoint to further that. What I'll just explain briefly is our thought that with this affidavit, with a CPA certifying on those financial statements that they believe that there's no indication that it would not be a going concern, that is sufficient, because they're taking in discussion the size and scope and what is there and what they're being asked to certify and ongoing projected financials. So we think we're accomplishing that to the best of our ability as it states.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. And Mr. Hood, to be clear, assisted living communities, they range from, they may be 25 beds at the minimum, and they may be hundreds of beds, 300-400 beds. So extremely broad range. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you. Representative Lupton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, way down there. My question is kind of simple. The department is vouching for the financial status of a company, no matter what size. Is there any liability that falls back on the department should, even though the financials look good, it goes out of business in 19 months, 20 months?
What? Is there a way to fall back on that?
So I don't believe that there's any liability on the department itself. We would rely upon the CPA to bring that forward if it was brought into question that was inaccurate upon the application. And that's really why we want a CPA to be present there, that if there is some indication that there was fraud in any instance in the presentation of cash flow and financials that was presented, then we would be able to rely upon that CPA's opinion and licensure if it were to come to some legal issue, as the chairlady was inferring, perhaps, if there were a legal case brought forward and they did close and you had a resident who was trying to recoup. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe there's liability on the department itself. We take that, because of good faith efforts, and we have, to my understanding, legal coverage in statute that we're just the regulatory agency.
Okay.
Representative Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the determination of the financial stability, is there national model standards that are used there, or is that at the department's discretion to determine on their own?
So we're relying upon the CPA's licensure and their professional certification of an affidavit that the financials are sufficient for the operation that's being put forward. And it's my understanding they're looking at a forward-looking financial projections on what the expense and operations would be of that facility when they're making that determination for an affidavit. And that's what we're totally relying upon. That the department is not exercising any discretion beyond that. So if the CPA comes forward and says we give an adverse opinion, for example, in this regard, and we will not certify to that nature, that's what we're going to rely upon. If they say that it's good and they have, they're a valid in good standing licensure, then we're going to accept that.
Thank you.
Representative Okoye, my understanding is you have a question. Will you use Ms. Lupton's mic?
Oh, for you gave anything.
I'm sure she will.
Because that would include the
Will the gentle lady yield the mic? My question is still on the threshold. I understand the wide range of these facilities, but can we have a tiered system based on the number of beds, for the threshold of the finances needed? Because if we leave it open, I trust the discretion of the department, but sometimes human nature, we may make mistakes. And asking CPAs to certify a business based on amount, and sometimes they might be asking them to just wave a magic wand and tell us that this business is viable. Can we help them by having a tiered threshold for the facilities based on number of beds? Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to let Joe answer for you. I think, as we said before, it varies with every case and group that comes forward because of what they offer. Are they buying the land and building the facility? What are they going to offer in that facility? I mean, so there, how many beds is important, and that is one of the figures, but there's so many variables. Are they going to have a memory care unit? How big is that memory care unit? So really trying to, put a specific price on something, and we've run into problems with that about putting things in law. As we can all tell, inflation has made things cost more. In our CON law, when we did the facilities, the freestanding surgery centers, we are under a cap. I think it was something like $3,000 that they could use to finish off their facility, and now $3,000 won't cover the flooring. And so, but that's been the cap that's been in there. So putting caps in can also be a detriment if it keeps a facility from being able to build everything they want to build with the kind of good materials they want. And I'll let Joe add to that.
So I'll just add to that a little bit. I mean, certainly the chair lady's absolutely correct. You could have facilities that might have a swimming pool. Some might not have a swimming pool. They might have a full fitness gym. It just depends upon how many amenities they have in that facility and how large it is. I will say that we have tiering already, in my mind, in place. We have personal care homes, which are smaller bed facilities by definition. And then we have assisted living. To be in assisted living, you have to have a specified threshold of beds in order to qualify for that community. And then you also have to meet an architectural standard that has to do with the mobility of the residents for an assisted living community. So just because you have, let's say, 30 beds, if you don't have an architectural structure that meets the standards for an assisted living community, you can't be licensed as an assisted living community. So there already is a tier. There's the personal care home, assisted living, and then nursing home is the level of acuity of how we think about that. And we've structured that in the bill that the chair lady sponsored some years ago that we're amending slightly here today to try and best address that with staffing and with all the things that you're referencing. I don't know that we could go beyond that to further tier due to what the chair lady is giving as examples. It would be difficult. And just to remind you, we are going to look at a per bed basis from a facility standpoint. So when we go in and sample at the department level on a survey, we're going to make sure that a single bed or room meets the standard, and that's going to be relevant throughout, whether it's 25 beds, 100 beds, or what have you. They've all got to meet the minimum standards for that facility, and that's not going to change depending upon that size of bed scope. So I'm not exactly sure what we would put from a regulatory standpoint into a tiered structure.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Representative LaHood, and then we'll go to Representative Jackson for one last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to hopefully bring some clarity. There's a lot of history here on this topic. And I've worked with the department a good bit over the last couple of years, and they've been good to, help the assisted living industry through some of these glitches to iron out some of the unintended consequences of House Bill 987 from 2 or 3 years ago. And this is one of them, where the CPAs want to cooperate and want to be a part of this process, but they were hesitant to put their name on the line and guaranteeing financial stability for years into the future. There's just no way for them to guarantee that. And so, and as has been discussed, there's such a wide range of operating expenses based on the design, bed count, location of the applicant. I've seen dramatic swings in operating cost that are unpredictable. But as Mr. Hood stated, just the fact that the applicant is complying with the building code, has a certificate of occupancy, has met all the rules and regulations to even get a license is an indication that they've had financial backing significant enough to have banks, investors, other sophisticated financing mechanisms supporting this organization. And so I do support the bill for that reason, and appreciate the department's goodwill here and using their discretion to determine the financial stability.
Thank you, Representative LaHood. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Representative, trying to get it on.
Let me apologize for being late, but leaving one meeting and running into another one. Let me make sure that I am addressing House Bill 309. Okay. In reading over this, my concern is if people are going or they do not have the financial stability that is required by law, and they may have to close the facility. I notice here in line 22 and also in line 2041 that a 60-day notice, written notice, should be given. But then when you look at line 44 and line what's one right? It should be right. 25. That a 14-day written notice should be given to the department and all residents of any impending change. Is that wise to give just 14 days when you have families to consider as to whether or not where they're going to move their relatives? I can see if it was 60, 60 or 60, 30. Am I reading this wrong?
That's
it
just
said at a minimum, but a minimum even of 14 days. I think it should be higher than that because families are having difficulty in moving their loved ones from one place to another.
okay. That is about telling us if they're going to change ownership. That a change of ownership has to have the 14 days. They still have to let the residents know and give them 60 days. But they have to let the department know that they're selling it to somebody else so the department can get, correct?
Chair, may I ask another question, please?
Right?
Yes. All right, let me make sure I'm clear on this. The 60 days is given to all residents of any impending moves.
Right.
In these facilities, you have residents with Alzheimer's, with various other mental illnesses. You may tell them, but their families may not know. And I'm saying is the 14 days, which will give notice, I guess, to the families as well, enough time for them to be able to relocate their relatives?
To be clear, let me see if I can help with this. To be clear, my understanding is, so in lines 41 and 44, to speak the two Representative Jackson speaking to, we're talking about two different circumstances, correct? So in one circumstance on line 44, we're talking about a change of ownership, which typically is going to be a good thing, or at least a unilateral thing, where one ownership comes in and they have to prove that they have the financial wherewithal, but there's no displacement of the individuals who live there. So that's why you have the shorter timeline. On line 41, where you're dealing with 60 days written notice, I'm sure the department would love to have as much as possible, but you're talking about a scenario where it speaks to bankruptcy and eviction. So I think you're saying at minimum, if you're being evicted from this property or you're going bankrupt and you're going to fail to provide a quality of care to these people in your care, you've got minimally to give a 60-day written notice. Is that fair, Mr. Hood?
Yes, sir. That's absolutely fair and equitable. And just one other consideration for the committee's awareness. You know, when you consider the length that you're giving notice, you're also giving staff that notice. If you give staffing notice much before that, you may not have staff by the time you reach the end of closure. So it's a balance that you're trying to reach, because certainly the staff is going to look for other employment and move.
That's an excellent point.
So it's a
Creates
balance.
more instability.
Yes.
Excellent point, sir. All right, we're going to have one last question from Representative Campbell, I think, right there. Representative Campbell, is that you? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm reading the point that we've just been talking about, it does appear to me, if I'm understanding the intention and the words, that there are two different scenarios that we're trying to anticipate. The first is impending bankruptcy or property eviction with 60 days. The second is a change of ownership, but both are related to the possible forced discharge or relocation. It's not either or, they are both related to that. And so it isn't clear to me why there would be such a dramatic difference of 60 days for one and 14 days for the other.
Joe, I see what you touched. Line 45, the representative speaks to. Joe, can you answer that?
Yeah. The difference is really what the chairman alluded to, is that we don't anticipate disruption to the same extent on change of ownership, but we do believe that there should be notice so that we can do an appropriate survey and that we can prepare for that from the department standpoint, and to the residents in the event that they think that that's going to adversely impact them. It depends upon the circumstance of the change of ownership, right? It could be, I think as was alluded, it could be a simple exchange where they're buying it and no services are intended to be disrupted. They could be coming in and saying we're going to add services and they anticipate changes, but there's really no, it's not the same disruption. On a bankruptcy, it's clear you're going to have to move, and the department needs that additional notice because we have to try and coordinate and assist in that movement to other facility types in their area, and we try and work with folks to do that. So that's why we want a longer span where it's definitive you're going to close, versus change of ownership it's not. Our expectation is you're going to continue to operate.
And respectfully, Chairman, just one additional question there. Understand and would share that the hope that there would not be a change, but probably a very routine example might be a change of ownership is change of pricing. And again, if the intention is to protect the residents, 14 days seems very unrealistic for a change.
So I will just point out that is present law, and the bill doesn't contemplate this area. There's not a proposed change from the department standpoint in this area. So we really are not going to take a stance on the number of days, other than say we're enforcing what is in present statute, and that's not the change that we're seeking today. We're just trying to resolve the financial assessment period. So I'm not going to speak to whether that's the right number of days or the wrong number of days. That would be for the discretion of the legislature. But that is what the present law is, and that's what we enforce and utilize. And I don't have specific examples to the contrary where that's not working today.
Mr. Hood, thank you for your explanation. To your point, again, so that everyone's clear, yes, all of these are portions of the bill that are currently in law. I want to emphasize one other thing, Mr. Hood, and that is this. Current law, in the broader context, the current law, beyond what we're looking at today, which is just a piece, is that any resident who's being discharged must receive a 30-day written notice of discharge. So to be clear, my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that none of this supersedes that, because the requirement to discharge any resident requires a 30-day written notice. And by the way, that's required in personal care homes and assisted living communities. Is that true? Because that may help Representative
That's my
Campbell
understanding,
as well.
Mr. Chairman. I believe you're accurate on that.
Thank you, sir. Okay. All right. All right. So, I think we've thoroughly discussed this. My understanding of this is we are increasing the degree of scrutiny on new owners of these facilities to make sure that they have the wherewithal to ensure that people get the care that they need. So we are focusing again, as we did on Representative Cooper's very good initial bill, on trying to increase safety in these facilities. Does anyone, what is the will of this committee? We have a move, do pass, Chairman Bonner.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Representative Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I do wish you would reconsider the number of days not pertaining to the first part, 22 or whatever the numbers were originally, but the number, if that, because it may change hands, I understand that. But if the facility has to close completely, I've had 3 people in nursing homes, and if I had to move them within 14 days, it would not have been possible. Since there is a gap between a 60-day notice and a 14-day notice, can there be a 30-day notice instead of a 14-day notice? And if not, why?
Mr. Hood, would you like to answer that?
I'd be happy to address it. From a department standpoint, our concern is to correct the challenge that we have before us, and it would be our desire that if there were changes that would be like to be further made, that be done in a different situation so that we don't put any jeopardy upon this passing as we move forward.
It appears the department has not seen, the department has come to make sure I'm clear, the department has come to Chairman Cooper with seeking an improvement for the safety in these facilities, and the one that Representative Jackson's speaking to is not one that you have found to be a problem historically. Again, with other statutes, other regulations, I will say, rules and regs for these facilities. So it sounds like the department would be uncomfortable at this time with recommending a change without having really diligently studied that. And I think we don't have industry here to discuss that either with. So that is my understanding. Any further discussion? Representative Donahue? Nope. Oh, Lumsden? Okay, you must have bumped it. I'm sorry. All right, Representative LaHood, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Let's see. There you go.
And I'll make this quick, but just want to offer a little history again. Prior to 2020, when House Bill 987 passed, which was a pretty significant transformation of the oversight of assisted living communities, there was 0 days requirement to give notice to the department before a change of ownership that may impact, the displacement of a resident. So the 14 days is a fairly new requirement, that moved up from 0. And so this has been in place. I think the rules were promulgated and put into effect sometime later in 21. And so this 14 days really hasn't been around that long, but it's an improvement from 0 that was in place prior to late 21.
All right. Any further commission? Any further discussion? We need to move quickly. Who's on? Is that Representative Lupton? All right. Representative Okoye. All right. Last comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a great bill, and it's a great improvement from what exists, and it's a bill that I think most of us will support. But, Mr. Chairman, can we look at striking through on line number 45, where it says any impending change of ownership that may force discharge or relocation, because that's what's actually confusing some of us. If we can strike it through, then 14 days is fine. But you know, sometimes some businesses might hide under it instead of the 60 days, and that would be really difficult to relocate somebody in 14 days. So look at striking through that line, well, not the whole line, the part that says forced discharge or relocation of residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Okoye. Here's what here's the posture we're in. Here's the, I'm sorry, got it. Here's my decision on this. So we're not going to accept an amendment on this. This has got to be vetted by the department. It's not in a position to do that here today. And so we have a motion and a second. Here's what I will recommend, though, Representative. You have every right to craft a bill that will deal with this new section that really isn't addressed in this measure specifically today. Would welcome you to do that if you believe and if you study and learn that there have been some failures by providers across the state because of this language on line 44 or 45. I would welcome you to craft a bill, and we'll certainly hear it here fairly. As you see, we're hearing everything that's been in this committee today, so we'll fairly hear it. I think for today, we're trying to accomplish an improvement in the interest of safety in these assisted living communities. We have thoroughly discussed this. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, let's do division, and all in favor, hands up. All right. Let Miss Bailey count. Got 11? 11. Noes, raise your hand. Four. All right, 11-4. This bill is passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Cooper.
Members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. As always, very helpful information. It's important that we keep folks safe and the most vulnerable in our society. All right, we are going to now go to House Bill 497. I'm sorry. They all run together after a while, don't they? Okay. We'll probably have 479 tomorrow. Huh? So, yeah, if you'll go to the podium, we'll have Representative Chairman John LaHood on House Bill 497.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. House Bill 497 is a bill that would it's a workforce bill, and the third-party health care provider for the Department of Corrections in Georgia has approached me about this. And so just for some history, today, a certified medication aide can only be employed and perform services inside of a licensed nursing home, a skilled nursing center, or an assisted living community. Those are the only two employers that can employ a CMA. This bill would allow a CMA to be employed by a correctional institution or the healthcare provider providing services inside a correctional institution. It's not expanding the role of a CMA, it's just simply allowing that certified medication aide to perform the same services in a correctional institution that they're now performing in a nursing home or an assisted living community. And basically that's the administration or supervision of self-administration of medications that come prepackaged from a pharmacy, marked with the patient's name, date, time. The CMA goes through a lot of training to even get certified, and quarterly reviews, annual skills competency checks. Again, none of that's changing. It's just simply allowing the CMA, Certified Med Aid, to perform the same services inside a correctional institution that they're already performing in other places. And then Section 2 goes along with this and actually supports the workforce by removing barriers to people becoming certified as a nursing assistant, a certified nursing assistant. So to become a certified to become a certified medication aide, the candidate would first have to be a certified nursing assistant. And what we're seeing in the workforce today is a severe shortage of certified nurses assistants. And so what this is going to do is allow the department to establish and rule and broaden, in some cases, the pool of people that can become a CNA. For example, you've got people with different credentials like EMTs or medical patient care technicians who have had similar training, but just because of a technicality, a semantic in today's statute and or rule, are not eligible to sit for the CNA test. And so this would just help with some workforce shortages and hopefully increase the pipeline of CNA candidates to sit for the test and relieve some of the pressure we're seeing in these settings where CNAs are employed and then CMAs are employed. And I'll be glad to take any questions if there are any, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, so I want to make sure everyone understands, just to echo some of what you said. So a certified medication aide is a CNA by definition, who then gets additional training in medications. We've now just recently allowed them in skilled nursing facilities, and of course they were from inception allowed in assisted living communities like those we just discussed. So the first part of your bill is allowing them in our correctional institutions across the state. And but speak a little more fully to, so we all know that absolutely we're struggling to find caregivers, and I'll use that term more broadly. Most caregivers aren't certified, but whether they are or not, we can't find enough of them. So in Section 2, I mean, you see this as really accelerating the opportunity to increase the number of CNAs and CMAs throughout the communities of the state?
I think it could really make a difference. Full disclosure, I'm an employer in this space. I employ a lot of CNAs, nurses, direct caregivers, and what we're seeing is just a general overall decline in people entering this profession at the entry level. And so it's put a tremendous strain and made it a lot more difficult and challenging to provide quality services to our customer, who's usually an elderly resident, some of them memory impaired. And so what we're trying to do here is just broaden the base of candidates that can even become a CNA and then CMA. And I did just remember that talked with the department prior to this meeting earlier today, and there's one amendment I'd like to offer to line 87, where it says, has relevant experience as determined by the department. In cooperation with the department, I'd like to add an amendment that says, a change to this line that says, has relevant professional or educational experience as determined by the department. So, okay. In reality, what happens is there's a lot of high school students in their junior and senior year that enter a health vocation track, and a lot of times that includes a CNA course. And there's a lot of folks, even after high school, maybe they started nursing school but had to drop out of nursing school deep into the process because they, had children they needed to raise, or for whatever reason just didn't finish nursing school. Or like I mentioned earlier, there's EMTs, there's patient care technicians, there's medical office administrative folks who have had a lot of exposure to health care, to caregiving. There's private home care aides. There's a lot of categories of folks who've had a lot of experience caregiving. But without this potential change that we're talking about, would have to put their life on hold and go to a several week or months long course before eligible to take the CNA test.
Okay, I'm going to be real sensitive to something that this bill, all the other bills before us today we've had for some time for review. This one is newer to all of our members, so I want to make sure everyone is fully able to ask all the questions they need. All right, any questions from our members? And then we'll probably hear again from Mr. Hood to this as well, if you don't mind. All right, Representative Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that additional opportunity given. I think that our rules suggest that we should have at least 2 hours to review bills before they are provided to us, and respectfully, we were not given that time today for this bill. So I appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to read and to consider questions. My questions, I have many, but the first one is related to the CNA. Could you explain specifically employer-sponsored as a variable here? Is there anything we should know about that? And secondly, can you describe the role and the responsibilities for the CNA? Are they allowed to administer medication, things of that nature?
Could you repeat the first part of your question? I don't think I heard you right.
Employer-sponsored certified. Can you describe a little bit about employer-sponsored certification? Is that the only way that a CNA is certified, through this employer-sponsored program?
No, ma'am. Actually, that's kind of a newer concept. I think we had a bill a couple of years ago that introduced the employer-sponsored training of certified nursing assistants. The training used to be confined to skilled nursing or a hospital type setting. The employer-sponsored program broadened it to include assisted living settings, personal care homes, private home care settings, those type settings, so that again, people who had exposure, workers who've had exposure, could
so it's
use that as towards their training. And as part of the training to become a CNA currently, there's a clinical requirement, a clinical training requirement where they spend a certain number of hours in a setting, such as nursing home, hospital, assisted living.
And if you would indulge another
Sure.
to that. So I understand in the medical setting, but I guess is it fair to say this is an in-house employer's training, recruiting staff, and then training them in-house?
Not entirely, but I do encourage that flexibility to do so. Like I said, otherwise an employer their hands are tied. They're just going to sit there and wait on a CNA to come approach them to apply for a job. This way, see, in assisted living and personal care homes, CNAs are not required. A lot of our caregivers are not CNAs currently. They're people who usually have a heart, to serve others, and they come in and they either come to the employer with prior experience or they are trained on the job. There's pretty extensive training requirements that are in place and ruled today to get them oriented and trained and ready to provide care to these residents. This is just in the sub. today was just, we discovered that there was a line in here that would have excluded candidates that are currently eligible to become CNAs, such as high school students who have not graduated high school yet but have completed a CNA course.
Representative, let's get Mr. Hood, if you don't mind, sir. It might be helpful to have you there as well. And to Representative Campbell, I want to make something very clear. So I haven't made a decision about voting on this measure today. It came in under the wire. We want to take the opportunity to hear it. That doesn't mean we're voting on it. That depends on the posture of this committee. So we got to make sure that we're comfortable with what we're doing here. Before we do that, it may be we come back and do that the first part of next week. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Typically here, we minimally want 24 hours for you to have a bill in your hand. And but we're trying to take the opportunity while we're meeting to knock it out. All right. Mr. Hood, is there anything you would add to Representative Campbell's questioning?
Maybe just a little bit of clarity. A certified nursing aide is set up in federal regulation under the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare through CMS, and it is for nursing homes predominantly, which is what the chairman was alluding for. And it's federally supported in the Medicaid program, and they set a provider who does the training today that the department contracts with to provide training courses so that you could go out and go through the training course and get basically a certificate at the end, and then you have to demonstrate physical skills in front of someone. It's a number of skills in order to reach final certification. There's a test that you have to take at the end of your training that's set by the feds in order to do that. In some states, they have allowed for people who are qualified, for example, an EMT, for example, might be one example that could come and probably test out of that without having to undergo this lengthy training course because they've already had licensure to the same extent to come and test. And essentially, that's what partly we're trying to do here at the end of the Department of Corrections edition of this bill, is to allow you to test out if you have professional or educational experience where you could just come forward, test, and demonstrate skills. So I hope that's helpful to clarify what there are for the training course. There are facilities that have their own certified training, but they have to go through the contractor in order to do that, and there are some challenges to become certified and so forth. So that's another reason to provide this alternative if they already have the professional or educational background to test out.
Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Y'all, I appreciate your work in taking care of our elderly community. I know it's really important, and I just want to make sure we're getting this right. Is the currently who is the position in the penal institutions filled with right now? Like, who are we replacing?
I believe the answer is licensed nurse. And the last data I saw says that there's 28,000 open nursing positions in the state of Georgia. And so this would help to relieve that. And the Section 2, the CNA portion of this bill, is in place because if we allow CMAs to start being employed in correctional institutions, there's not enough of them either. And so we've got to produce more. And that's the spirit of Section 2, is just to help produce more CNAs who can become CMAs.
Sure.
And then a lot of them will be future nurses. That's a lot of times the pathway entry-level workers take before furthering their education.
A follow-up, if I may.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. And I supported the expansion of the training of the CNAs. I really thought that was great. I think we did that, 2 years ago, 3 years, something like that. But I really just want to make sure that we're not lowering the quality of care. So currently, can anyone, and I'm not in the medical field, can anyone tell me, do CNAs offer medication right now?
No, they can't.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're creating a different class that a CNA can graduate to in order to be qualified to offer medication by creating a class of a certified medication aide.
Right. The certified medication aid class was created, I think it was around 2010 or 11, specifically for assisted living communities.
Gotcha.
When that level of licensure was created. So they've been around 10, 12 years or more. And so, yes, the CNA is, CNA is not administering medications. The CMA goes through further training and certification before they're allowed to supervise or administer medications.
Okay. Follow up, if I may, sir?
Sure.
So if they are already in existence, then why are we having to, and if it's not a scope change, why are we having to list the duties that they would be allowed to do?
That may be a question for Ledge Council. I'm not exactly sure why we needed to list everything, all the scope in here. But the scope hasn't changed. It's the same as it is in the other settings.
It's just adapted for inmates and that kind of thing, rather than residents in a assisted living.
Yeah, so I think
Betsy,
Betsy's
you may
explaining.
need to use your mic, but my understanding is because we specifically allow CMAs only in 2 licensed facilities now, we're now adding it to a new licensed facility in correctional institutions. I'll use that term, but let our legislative council member answer that.
Yeah, I think
You're
it's
on.
essentially the same scope of work that they're doing in the assisted living homes, but the language is just adapted, to be applicable to inmates in a correctional institute.
So may I clarify, just, it's just a restatement of their existing duties because it's in a whole nother setting and we want to be clear about what they're
Correct.
allowed to do and what they can't do. Is that
Correct. Yeah, it's just a restatement.
Okay.
Yep, it's a good way of putting it.
Very limited with what they can do. Is that those are great questions.
Thank you very
Representative
much.
Fried.
I
Is
appreciate
that
that.
fair, Joe? I mean, that way it's clear in this new facility. This is what you can do. To be
Yes,
clear.
the only thing I wanted to add was, it's my understanding the CMAs are tied to licensure type for HFRD. So in assisted living, for example, that's tied to a licensure type. In a correctional facility, we don't have that today. We're not going to license a correctional facility. So my understanding is that's why you're restating, because it's only relevant to where we have it in statute to the licensure type where we're applying it.
May I restate that for clarification?
Yeah.
So since you already have it in code for a license that you issue, then you're restating it because this is in a section of operations for licenses that you don't issue.
That's correct.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions from the committee? We want to be thoroughly educated about this, and we have someone else who wants to speak to it. Most of our caregivers, I'm going to say this to make sure you can nod in acknowledgement there, Mr. Hood. Most of our caregivers in this state overwhelmingly are not certified. They are far and away, they're qualified. They meet whatever criteria for whatever licensure, but overwhelmingly they're not certified nursing aides or certainly not certified medication aides. So to the degree that we create a ladder for people to have in this career, I think that's a good thing. I'm not speaking to this bill, whether it does that or not. I'm saying that generally we do want to see that we have some kind of ladder of success for people who see themselves as caregivers. Is that fair, Mr. Hood?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. To that point, during the pandemic, we had such a staffing shortage that CMS authorized us to go to a TNA program, a temporary nurse aide, and basically to bring folks in who had not undergone the training and basically do on-the-job training during the pandemic. We have over 8,000 of those, to my understanding, who in some capacity did that. This would be a path, perhaps, that they could more easily get to a CNA. Perhaps they've been working for a year or more as a temporary nurse aide under that waiver authority, and they've achieved those skills. Now what we would do today is say, well, you need to go and take this course of study and then come forward and test. They're probably, many of them, ready to test today. My understanding is this would allow us to recognize that as a department and say, we recognize your professional or educational background and think you can test today and then demonstrate skills. So that number, I think, is what I want to bring forward. 8,000 out there statewide. I'm sure there are many others, to your point, sir, that are not certified. The chairman alluded to that earlier. Assisted living uses all types of of caregivers who are not necessarily certified to an extent of a certified nurse aide, which again is predominantly for the acuity type in a nursing home.
Mr. Hood, if we, so we're going to, in Section 2 here, we're basically making it easier for people to come CNAs without necessarily the coursework, I'll use that term, and they take the same test, and you've got to authorize the experience and so forth. So I know you must assume, I know you want quality, and the department insists on it. So is there any concern with us losing, to some of the other questions, quality in those caregivers with the certification by changing this? It's real important, I think, that we as a committee know that.
No, because we still have the minimum standard of the test that they have to obtain, the minimum score per CMS to become a CNA, and then they still have to demonstrate physical skills. We've been pretty dominant about that they still have to go through a skills testing and show, I think it's a random number of skills that they would use to get their final certification. You know, with those caveats, we don't really have that concern because they've got to pass that. And even in this instance, with the chairman's ad, you know, the department will have the ability to assess that they have some level of professional or educational experience prior to coming forward, that we're not just going to take someone who has no experience whatsoever, that they would have something, an EMT, or I think he listed off several that might be qualifiers to test.
Mm-hmm. Very well, thank you. Other questions from the committee?
I am, if I may,
yes, sir.
make a comment.
Yes, Chair.
I'm glad Mr. Hood mentioned the temporary CNAs, 8,000 of those here that are in jeopardy of losing that temporary certification very soon. I see some of my friends from the nursing home world back there nodding. I forget when that date is, but it's not far off. And so if we could give them the ability to test,
Gotcha.
they could remain in the workforce. But without this, an already strained workforce will become much more strained.
Okay. Well, let's hear from the skilled nursing facilities. Speaking of that, Sheila Humberstone is here to speak to this measure. You're up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sheila Humberstone. I'm with Stonebridge Consulting, and I am here on behalf of the Georgia Healthcare Association representing Georgia's long-term care industry. I want to offer my sincere thanks to Chairman LaHood for his incredible work on this issue in supporting our nursing workforce and the workforce that our healthcare institutions so desperately need right now. As was alluded to, we were able to use via the federal public health emergency temporary nurse aides. Those expire. How many of you are unaware, you don't have to raise your hand, we'll make you raise your hand, but how many of you are unaware of the workforce shortage that we have right now? It's incredible. It is exacerbated and significantly worse in our facilities. And if you lose those 8,000 folks at the end of April because we haven't transitioned them into a CNA spot, then we may not be able to continue taking care of our patients. We also have some federal guidelines that are going to be coming down and converging at the same time with some minimum staffing requirements. We have to have all of these things working together, and I agree wholeheartedly. We can grab folks who may have left the healthcare industry because of exhaustion or whatnot during COVID and bring them back in to our facilities and continue to work. They will still be passing the skills test, so you can be confident that these folks are capable of taking care of folks in our homes, in an assisted living home. I'm not speaking for the penal system, but certainly for them as well, without worry, because they still have to pass the test. So again, I really appreciate you being willing to take on this issue. It is incredibly timely, and it's really critical for us moving forward. So I'm not a subject matter expert on this part of things, but I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have, or I'm sure Joe Hood would be able to step in where I mess up.
Let's see if we have any questions from our committees, and while we do, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do you know,
Yes,
Ms.
sir.
Humberstone, how much time and effort a caregiver, I'll use that term, a caregiver working in a skilled nurse facility, what kind of time and effort would they save with this measure compared to what the circumstances today where they have to go through
So I think,
class.
quite frankly, with the job market the way it is, and this is a Sheila Humberstone, not necessarily a Georgia healthcare opinion, so she can shove me off of the podium if you need. But the real fear is if we make it hard for them to continue to work in healthcare, there are a lot of options for them to go someplace else. If these TNAs don't get enveloped into our system and stay in the healthcare workforce, they can, and I represent retailers, so don't tell Kathy Kazava, but they can go work in retail very easily tomorrow. And so we've got to take advantage of the skills and the education that they've been afforded during this emergency and keep them in the fold.
Gotcha. Any questions? We have one. Representative Lupton.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. Just to beat maybe a dead horse that's obvious to everybody, to become a CNA now, you need to go through some training courses. Then you need to take a test, written test, skills, become CNA. This enables people who are perhaps already in the workforce to skip the course part, take the test, take the skills, become CNA.
That's right, and we're trusting that the department is going to be able to come up with those guidelines, and we have great confidence that they're going to be able to make sure that the relevant experience is the most important piece, right? We don't want to specify that because oftentimes in rules we'll overdo it or underdo it. But by punting that to the department, we can make real-time changes and see the impact, and if we need to come back and tweak it over time, we're afforded the opportunity to do that, so I do agree.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Scott.
Okay, good afternoon. Why are we losing 8,000 nurses?
So I think what was being referred to, the question for those of you who didn't hear, was the 8,000 nurses that we might be losing is the temporary nurse aid program, which is authorized at the federal level. But they have a certain amount of time, I think it's 120 days to get certified or whatnot to move into that being a CNA. And if we don't get them moved into that space, then presumably the TNA program goes away.
Okay, may I ask another question? So what type of, what are you all doing to help them to become certified? Are you giving them training, extra training on the?
Absolutely. There's a lot of training that goes on in the facilities, and I'm sure the department can speak, but there's federal guidelines about what the course looks like. I think DCH authorizes certain testing centers for skills checkoffs. All those things are being done sort of at a combination of the federal level and then the state administering the TNA program and working with folks like us to get these folks skilled up and ready to go.
Okay, Representative McDonald.
And you kind of answered a little bit of it with that statement. Just explain, if you don't mind, I may have missed something, the testing itself. Like, how's it administered, where, what type, is it a testing center, or tell us how, because if you don't pass the test, you don't get the...
Mr. Hood, that may be a good question for you, because I think the department affords some of that testing to be done in a skilled nursing and other facility, but I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, better to let Joe answer.
It frankly depends. We have a contractor that does that statewide and reaches out to different facility types and technical schools and other locations to do the testing. Some of the facilities themselves are certified to do the training and do the testing, so it's a varied aspect of that. Presently, we're partnering with the University of Georgia so that we can address some of the TNAs to do some virtual testing of the physical skills that we're hoping to implement during this time frame before the TNA window expires. But this would give us further opportunity beyond that. If y'all were to pass this bill, it would allow them to test out even after the fact if we recognize their experience. But it really just is varied throughout the state. But we have the standards set, as she alluded to, by our contractor, and that's set and paid for by Medicaid.
Okay. So the people at the centers, like at a skilled nursing center or facility, that can get certified to do the test, is what you're saying, to administer the test?
Yes, they could have their own. There's of course means that you have to go through and steps you have to go to be certified within a facility, but there are nursing homes particularly who have gone through that process and are their own training facility for CNAs. It's more likely that you would have a technical school and dual enrollment, like the chairman spoke about, though, where you would go through. It's really a certificate program that you would go through and finish, and then you would go and test.
It benefits the facility to make sure these people pass the test. I know Scan Edge wouldn't have got through Georgia if it didn't have some help and everything. So I went to Georgia too, but I just would. That was kind of my question to make sure that tests are administered properly.
Yes, they are administered per the Medicaid standard and per the contract.
I think Campbell is next. Representative Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This follows that question a little bit, and thank you for the clarification. I truly appreciate all the opportunities and the ideas here for developing, it was mentioned, young people or caregivers, and providing them with additional professional development so that they have greater opportunities, and for our patients so that we have staff. Having said all that, I would like to know a little bit more about, is there currently one standardized test? And if that's the case, in this provision where on line 90 we talk about, it says has achieved a minimum score. We're not if there is a statewide minimum score that is already established, this bill is not changing that. Is that an accurate statement or fair to say?
Yes, that's accurate. And certainly y'all could do whatever is your desire, but at the federal level that maintains the certification for the CNA, that's a CMS standard that we have to abide by for the federal funding that accompanies that and so forth. So that's why it's structured that way. That wouldn't change to my understanding.
Very good question.
I think the purpose of that being in there is to make sure we're giving flexibility on the coursework side, but we're not giving flexibility on the testing side.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we have been going through this, I've read it. I know there is a need for your, and I don't know the difference in a CNA and a CMA or what. Now, CMA, it's indicated the medical person, the medication person. Am I correct? That yes, you want to administer the medicine.
That's a CMA, yes, ma'am.
CMA,
yes,
okay.
It's alphabet soup.
You know, I think it's a good way, and we've talked about this, of trying to move our assistants up to another level in order for them to make more money than what it is. And I like the idea that this is going to be under the supervision of a head nurse or whatever you administer under a head nurse. And also, I read over here something about, the time frame and how you're going to do it. I know that in nursing homes they do the prepackaged medicines and what have you. It is a good way of moving everybody up, but I just had the same question and seeing it for the first time. I did not quite understand exactly whether it was a CNN or a CME, do whatever.
Oh, and I got a big bill to present tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
1:30.
So I think it's an excellent bill, and I would like to, Mr. Chairman, read over it again because I have not read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Shelley, I think you should have been up there from the start. I don't think anybody would have had any questions. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. But I do have one real question, though.
Yes.
And thank you for what you're saying. Is the department prepared to be able to test all these 7,000 to 8,000 folks? Y'all got that? You're kind of at least planning in the stage right now, right? Because that's in 2 months.
I referenced the University of Georgia contract. That's our effort to try and do additional physical skills tests. That's really where, to my understanding, we've been challenged. And I do think that there are challenges in testing sites. But so to the extent that we can, we certainly will support that and support anything that we can to further the testing sites. But I do think that, to my understanding, there are challenges there, and that's why we've entered that partnership and tried to further. What we plan to do is have an RN do virtual observation of a physical test in a facility, and we're hopeful that that will be successful in furthering us along in testing.
Thank you so much.
I think that's
Mr.
what's...
Chair, it sounds like we need to vote on this bill and get this thing rolling, you know? I appreciate y'all's detailed explanation, and thank you for humoring the questions. And this sounds like an important thing, so I'd make a motion if the committee was okay with it.
All right, before I accept that motion, I want to ask this body if they feel, historically, I tried to make sure we had plenty of time for vigorous debate. Is everyone here, is the majority here comfortable with doing that, with pursuing this measure as it is? Okay. All right. Representative Fry, we will accept. You have a make a motion. Please do so.
Make a motion, Mr. Chair, to do pass.
You have a motion do pass. We have a second. Any discussion? Yep. Representative Bonner. Oh, correct. At the appropriate time. I got you. All right. And is there any other discussion before we get to that appropriate time? Okay. Nope. Okay. Anyway. All right. So it is the appropriate time, Representative Bonner. And let me get your mic on.
We got it.
You got it? Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we amend LC 339439S by addressing line 87, and after the word has, inserting the words professional or educational. So it would then read on line 87. Oh, excuse me.
I was fixing.
It would actually go after relevant. So the line 87 would read as follows: has relevant professional or educational experience as determined by the department.
Okay. On the motion, on the amendment, any discussion? And that is recommended by the department and the author. All in favor of the amendment? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, now back to the broader bill. So we have a motion. We have a second. We now have an improved line 87. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, bill is passed. Chairman LaHood, thank you. And Mr. Hood, thank you. The Hood brothers, we're working hard today. All right, now we're going to hear, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us on those. It's important that we, and you know, in the first meeting, I tried to bring in some folks to do the education because we have new members, and it's, you know, there's a lot of acronyms and there's a lot of facilities we regulate in the world of some of the areas that we deal with here. Now we have two bills, two resolutions that we're going to hear because they seem to require some explanation, and we're going to begin with Representative Schofield. So, Representative, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 399, and it's for the establishment of the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired to ensure that people who are blind or visually impaired have access to quality services so really they can maintain an independent living, successful career, promotion of upward mobility, and improve the quality of life that seems necessary. Basically, what this bill does is it transfers all blind services from the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency to an independent commission for the blind and visually impaired, aligning with the direct services. And again, it is important because we want to make sure that their voice is heard. So this commission would not only provide training for independent living and trying to get jobs, but we know that when blind people don't receive proper and adequate training for skills of blindness and become employed, it costs Georgia money. And so I know it's the figure is around 900,000 plus in dollars that they're not being able to contribute to. We know the job market is also not as open to blind people as they are in other states when there is a commission especially for the blind. In many states, the blind work as lawyers, scientists, teachers, information retrieval specialists, and in many occupations. And we know with the current state of the workforce that this is an opportunity that we can really empower and assist with training for the appropriate jobs. And so we also know that senior citizens who become blind need to regain their training in independence living. So this commission is established to deal directly with the needs of the blind and visually impaired. And so I'm going to bring up at this time Ms. DJ McIntyre and a few advocates to speak to the bill. Come on up.
Thank you, Representative. We'll let them quickly move to the podium, and then I'm sure we'll have questions.
Yes. And we just have
Representative, while they're coming, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you a couple of things just superficially, and I read over the measure. But first of all, so you're moving this, making it independent. These services are already provided through the Georgia Vocational Rehab Agency. And so it's not, they're already being provided, but you're creating a whole new agency to do so. Right. And what percentage of the disabled population that we serve at Georgia Vocational Rehab are blind? Because my understanding it's a low, what is the term, low density?
Right, and DJ probably, she just stepped out, can answer that
disability.
As well.
And so moving it from, I know there's some folks that, as I reached out and shared this, and as the chairman looked for feedback from some of the people in the departments and so forth, there was some concern about this. So help me to understand as you go through and we hear from others, why is it necessary to separate it and to create a whole new agency of government? Help us to understand that more fully. Thank you.
Because historically, when we had some changes early on, this population was not being serviced. Although the information and the services were there, they were not being properly serviced in that. And it's a low number. But really, if you train this low number of people, what it says for the state of Georgia is that when they become fully employed and working in a specific controlled, not controlled, but in an environment that deals with their direct service, they're paid taxes 9 times more to the state. The other thing is that there wasn't a voice on the council that represented the needs, the really distinct needs that they needed. And I'll bring up Ms. DJ, or who's coming first? Lonnie?
I'll come first.
Okay. I got you.
Find the stairs. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Schofield, for that introduction. I can only speak as DJ has the raw numbers better than I do, but I can speak to the personal experience of the situation, which has been in the current agency, Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation. I am a current client, and at a time when I was at risk of losing my job due to vision loss, I spent 13.5 months waiting for a plan to be developed by them to serve me. Now, that plan is supposedly moving forward, but I have to say, with the 3 counselors and almost a dozen staff members I've dealt with, I've only dealt with one who had prior experience dealing with a client with vision loss. I feel that I'm not understood, and the positive side of that is with a commission for the blind, those specialized counselors would be in place who know our needs, who understand our challenges, and can specifically serve us. So that's what I can say about my own experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Representative, we have other, okay. Very good. Take your time, my dear. Thank you.
Am I facing forward? You're facing forward. Okay. Sit. To speak. Okay. Thank you for letting me come and talk today. My name is Judy Presley, and I'm from Helen, Georgia. And back in 1994, when I lost my sight, I was sitting at home in absolute despair. My husband would go to work, my daughter would go to school, and I would just be sitting there in complete despair. And I found out that a homemaker was considered an occupation, so I was eligible for rehabilitation services. And so I had a rehabilitation service counselor came to my house once a month for about 6 months, and she taught me how to cook without sight, clean without sight, use a computer without sight. And the best part of all, she taught me how to use a white cane so that I could get out of my house and have a little freedom. And it was so wonderful to be able to walk to the grocery store independently by myself. I got that training. And then she filled out the papers for me to go get a guide dog. And boy, howdy, when I got a guide dog, that really set me free. And so I learned all these things, and I was able to go and volunteer at our Welcome Center there in Helen. And so it gave me great dignity and self-confidence to be able to do that. And it just opened up a whole new world to me. But unfortunately, those services were dropped very soon after I got my training. And so now that I am the vice president of the Georgia Council of the Blind, I get phone calls all the time from people. I got a call the other day from a guy who's 40 years old that lives in Cleveland. He's 40 years old, and he can't get services. There was a fellow who's 51 in Clarksville. He calls me up. He's sitting in his apartment listening to a television that he can't see, and he has to wait 4 more years before he can get services. That is sad. That makes me sad. That's like the dark ages. And I just feel like we Georgians can do so much better for our blind citizens than that. And I sure hope you would please pass this commission bill so we could get the services that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here. And members, we'll just hold our questions for Representative Schofield once these ladies have spoken to us. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dorothy Griffin, and I am a member of the Georgia Vision Alliance, and I am also an advocate for the blind, and all day I do work from home, and I am getting calls every week about individuals who are in need of services, are unable to contact their counselors, they aren't getting emails answered, callbacks, and they have been waiting and waiting, and some have gotten their services set to go but have not been able to start, and it's taking over 2 years for them to finally get their services in place and taking them. And it is sad that we are, ready and willing to work, and some of us do have skills. Some are newly blind that may have been homemakers or whatever, but we are in dire need of training. I think that the system that GVRA is they try, but I think it's failing us who are blind and low vision, and we really would like to move forward. And we do know what we need, and we want to get that need. And so I ask that you vote yes for that commission bill so that we can move into a better situation for all blind Americans in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We have one more, is that correct? Okay.
I'm your spokesperson.
Yes, complete. And
I'm the numbers person. I'm DJ McIntyre, and my mom was going to speak, but she was dealing with the toddler. We will let her do grandma duty. As you can see, I am not visually impaired. However, my mom is totally blind. So my 32 years of existence, I've been around a blind person and was homeschooled by one. She raised 4 of us. I'm the oldest. And so I can not speak from their firsthand experience, but I can speak from what we've gone through personally with GVRA. They were very unhelpful when we first got her job in 2008. Before that, she homeschooled us. And then she lost that job in 2012. And at that point, GVRA, we had some inside people we knew, and got her, actually had to send her to Rochester, New York for training for 12 weeks of training, excuse me. She did 6 weeks, got a week of break, went for 6 weeks more, and we were promised GVRA would get her a job in the hospitality industry. We spent 13 months applying to jobs, which ended up being my job because her counselors would not. Even if she found something, they're like, well, you have to figure out how to fill out that application. And I don't know about you, but the last time you filled out an online application, it is not accessible for blind people, much less easy for those of us with sight. So after that, we ended up just deciding after a year we were done. It just wasn't going to work out for us to have a job for my mom. And so since then, she's still on disability. She now lives with me, and she suffers from dementia. So at this point, it wouldn't be something that she could do unless it's something like a call center that we might be able to find from work from home. However, our experience with GVRA is very discouraging. I do have the numbers. I'm the numbers person. I've been crunching and doing a lot of different things. So I know I handed, a packet was handed to you from me that has our talking points. It has some testimonies. It has some talking points, and I just wanted to highlight some of the issues we have. And I pulled these numbers directly, if anybody wants to know, from Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Services. I spent about 4 hours, 2.5 of those during an appropriations hearing here on Health and Human Services, because the numbers that I received from GVRA did not give me accuracy for the blind services. And I specifically asked Mr. Wells for those numbers. The last 3 years, can you tell me how many blind people we've served? How many cases are open? What are we doing? And the numbers he gave me do not equal what their presentations at their quarterly meetings hold. Now, his annual report does not mention any of that, and that is...
Ma'am, thank you. I hate to interrupt you, but let me say this. We do have one more bill we've got to hear, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask you a question because I want to understand something. What you're speaking to, and this is why we're here today. We want to understand the problem, and I felt like that was value for us to hear this, but I need to ask you this question. So you just described the scenario where you've been trying to get information from Georgia Vocational Rehab. Have you ever had, so you failed as a citizen to get that information. Have you had your representative working, have you sought help from one of your representatives or one of your senators to that end from the department? That's my first question.
I have not, because none of my personal reps and senators are wanting to try to go up against an agency or ask information from them.
Well, but if you haven't asked them, you haven't spoken to them about it.
I have in previous years, not currently, because I have some new legislation.
But you haven't asked them to go on behalf of you to discover this information.
Various people have, but as far as I know, I have not.
Okay, I just want to understand that. So again, we've got some folks here that are here. So very briefly, because I want to make sure if there's any questions, we get them from you. And I know we'll have a couple of questions from Schofield. Very briefly, give us the broad overview, very quickly.
Absolutely. So for counselors in 2022, Mr. Wells and GVRA said they were wanting a caseload of 85 blind people per counselor. Their general caseload is 150. That means they would need 18 counselors for their 893 current cases in fiscal year 22. They had 7. They actually currently only have 6. Also, fiscal year 2023, that's the second page, they listed out all of the different separating blindness, deaf blindness, other visual impairments. It's a total of 808 open cases with only 25 closed cases. And the numbers they've given me for fiscal year 2022 is they closed 21 total cases. But if they have 893 open cases, how are we only getting 61. This is why the Commission for the Blind would take those people, would give them everything they need, and that's not including the people whose cases get closed early because GVRA deems that it's either not worth it or, like Ms. Nipper had explained, it's gone too long. It's taken them 13 months and they say, I'm done. I'm walking out the door, and those people do not get those jobs. And that is what we want, is jobs, orientation, mobility, and to serve every single visually impaired person from cradle to grave with this commission.
Sure, thank you. And we know well, we and everyone here wants everyone who can produce meaningful work to have opportunity to have that, and the value to them of having that. Thank you so much for being here. And Representative Schofield, so I have a question, and I knew this was going to be a little more complicated of a measure because we're talking about changing, that which is right now under the jurisdiction of the executive branch. So has there been an effort with the Georgia Vocational Rehab Agency to speak to a litany of failures or that have been alluded to? Has there been an effort to correct these things with that agency? As someone, but we've recently been hearing a lot about hoteling and those issues. So if there has been some failures, I don't know, I'm just listening today, but if there have been, has there been some effort to address those with the department? And have you addressed with Georgia Vocational Rehab this measure?
This bill it's a carryover from last year, so we had some conversations.
But yes. Last year, so it's a carryover. But you had addressed it. You've spoken with them.
I have last year, yes.
And they, of course,
made what we did. I would be open to sit down and have additional conversation.
Okay, gotcha.
Certainly.
And you could certainly have a conversation with them about failures that we might have heard today, and that you may have heard previously, and to address the whole broader issue. Because at the end of the day, what it sounds like, what we want to make sure of is that individuals across this state who are suffering with blindness have the opportunity to do everything they have the potential to do and to get the support they need to do that.
Absolutely.
Is that fair? Is anything else you'd like to say to us?
No, I appreciate that. And again, we want to see the services and everything met in that specific community. And I would love to have additional conversation, so that when we look forward to moving this bill forward, we make sure every I is dotted and every T crossed. So thank you very much, and I appreciate
you, Representative.
the time.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who showed up with you. We appreciate y'all. Representative Lee Hawkins has a measure, which is an HR, a resolution, HR 141. My understanding, Ms. Deborah Stokes is going to speak to that. And I'm sorry for the late meeting. We had a lot of questions today. That's a good thing. And
it's okay.
Let's hear about this recommended study. My understanding is this is coming from COAGE.
It is.
Okay, so you're a perfect one to present it.
Thank you very much, Chairman and distinguished committee members. This is a resolution to take a look at innovations in long-term care options. The resolution was brought from the Coalition of Advocates for Georgia's Elderly last year, and it made it through this committee and just got stalled after that. But we are asking for a study committee to take a look at the newer models of care for skilled nursing facilities. In the resolution is, again, House Resolution 141, and it's LC 520240. I hope everybody has that. Okay, excellent. So last year, as I said, it was a COAGE issue brought by our membership suggesting that Georgia take the lead in looking at new ways to care for our elderly, new models of care, as it were, that include, and in the bill it references the Eden Alternative and Greenhouse, but it's basically more patient-centered home care models for delivering the care in skilled nursing facilities. Representative Hawkins was kind enough to bring it back this year, and we really appreciate that. It was brought to us by one of our advocacy partners with the Wisdom Project 2030, Ms. Carol Hanlon, and she's here to answer any questions you may have and to present the newest information on the findings of the new models that are being used across the country. So we think this gives us a chance to put Georgia ahead of the curve in terms of looking at new models for care. And it's not just physical models, it's a patient-centered approach to taking care of the elderly.
Well, let's hear some of those updates. This is all new information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. In terms of the information, I want to just point out what is already in the verbiage here, which talks about what happened during COVID. Those numbers continue to stay in the ranges. So what we're looking at is person-centered care models that have better outcomes during God forbid we should have another pandemic, but certainly during an infectious disease situation. But really what goes beyond that, I've been working on this for almost 6 years now, and what I have learned along with the committee that works with me is that this is a complex area, and that a study committee would provide an opportunity to hear from the different stakeholders on the challenges and opportunities for adopting greater innovation in our nursing home care. And that's really what our goal is to open up that conversation. We will never move forward if we can't talk about it. So that is what I have to say. Any questions?
I have a quick question. Could you give us some examples of some facilities? So we have assisted living here. We have assisted living communities. We have personal care homes. We have skilled nursing facilities. We're talking about residential. What is an example of something that you allude to in here, the Eden Project and others? So
Yes.
give me an example of something that's really unique and innovative that, in your mind,
Yeah.
that is something that we don't have. It's a level or a service that is just not available in Georgia. Can you help us to understand that briefly?
Well, I could tell you that most of the nursing homes follow more of an institutionalized model, and I think our friends at the Georgia Healthcare Association would also share that view. We have some innovators here in Georgia. We have Deke Cato is his name, right? Deke Cato, that's doing something up in Marietta, but I've been personally in contact with a fellow named Andy Morris, who is up in Rockmart. And Andy has, I think, 6 or 7 nursing homes, all of which were in the traditional model. In the last couple of years, he has taken his licenses from one of those, and he has now built a campus that has 8 homes on it. Each home, it's a cottage. In that home are 10 to 12, actually he's got 12 to 14 persons living there. The home is like our house, it's just a little bigger. Each person has their own private room, their own private bath. The food is cooked inside the home. The concept is, it's more than just the physical though, it's really how it operates. And the service that he delivers at Rockmart is focused on the daily cadence, the rhythm of the people that live there. So it's not, in a lot of places, my dad was in assisted living, they have a certain amount of time to get people down to breakfast, because breakfast is served over certain hours. And that's not the rhythm of these homes. The rhythm of services delivered, the care that is given, et cetera, is at the rhythm of the person living there and with respect for their dignity.
Is that a skilled nursing facility?
Yes, sir. And that's really all we're talking about here are skilled nursing facilities.
And of course, there's limitations on, so that individual must have closed one site in order to do that because we have certificate of need requirements. So someone couldn't just decide to do one of these.
Yes, correct.
On the skilled nursing side. That
Correct.
would be a limitation. You do recognize that in Georgia.
Indeed, indeed, and that's actually why I've been working at this for 6 years, is because it's not just that easy to do. You have to find someone that's willing to take on the innovation, and it's the other piece of this that we've discovered is that it's a transformational process. It's not something that you stop one day and pick up the next. It's something that even existing operators have to think ahead, figure out how are they going to move maybe a large building to provide a care environment that is a home, a small home. So that is what I would share on that.
It's interesting that they're using smaller economies of scale that would have to affect their bottom line. It's interesting. I don't know if they're, I'm going to ask you one last question. If there's any members, let me know quickly. Because we want to be done by 6. The reimbursement rates, are they getting a different reimbursement rate in those sites than they do customarily because of the lower economies of scale?
Yeah, I think the reimbursement rates are directly linked to the level of service provided, and that I think is defined by the Department of Community Health.
So that would not change whether they're in a 10-bed, as you described it. So they're not getting any kind of addition because of the location is what I'm speaking to.
What I'm going to say is based on what I heard from an operator in Arkansas, and he has several greenhouse models that he operates around the state and is building more. What he told us was that because of the higher quality of care that they can offer in that smaller environment, that he has had the Medicare folks, the reimbursement folks in to talk about what they actually can do. And some of those are, I think, cognitive measures. There's a quality of life aspect to it that it's not just hours with a patient, but it goes beyond that, and they're able to justify some higher reimbursement rates because of that.
Thank you.
Also, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
May I just add one more thing?
Yes, please. Yes.
He also is a private operator, which I find very interesting because I think our first tendency is to think that it would have to be a nonprofit that would offer this. But in reality, what he has done is built homes that are available for people from all economic categories. And because the home has a higher reputation in the community, it attracts people who can pay for the services out of their own pocket, as well as a balance there with Medicaid. So it lifts the boat for everyone. And that, I think, there are lessons to be learned and things to be heard about that I think could come up in the study committee on that.
Thank you. Representative Campbell. Not you?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Representative Lupton.
It's quite all right.
You should be on.
It's quite all right. Thank you, Chair. I've had the honor of working with Deke Keto. I worked for 7 years at AG Rhodes, helping people with Alzheimer's and dementia and giving them a therapeutic music program. He's a great guy with a big heart for taking care of our seniors in really innovative ways. I was a part of AG Rhodes when they were discussing the Eden alternative and all this kind of stuff. And person-centered care. This is really important. These are important and very quality things that we can do to support not only our elders, but the families that care for those elders, making sure that they are secure, they are safe, and they are in a place where their families feel secure. I love this. I love what you're doing. Please keep doing it. I just wanted to give love.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Well, thank you, ma'am, for being here. Thank you so much. We have Mr. Tom Bauer that wants to speak. So, Mr. Bauer, Tom, come on up. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been around here long enough to know the hour is late. I'll be very brief. I'm Tom Bauer with Leading Age Georgia. We are very active participants in co-age, and we appreciate Chairman Hawkins bringing this bill. I wanted to bring one point to the table that, as Ms. Stokes mentioned, some of the language in the whereases refers pretty much to greenhouse and in Eden Alternative, and those are brand names, and and we have asked, and I think Ms. Stokes has shared some language with Chairman Hawkins to do some slight amendments so that when you consider it next time, it will add some words like household models, which is actually the term we use that D. Cato is doing, and I appreciate he's a member of our board, and we appreciate the shout-outs from both places, and we're very strong in support, and just wanted to give you a heads up that there would be that small amendment.
Thank you, sir. So Leading Age is a big supporter of this measure. Then I know
Yes, sir.
you have a good group of folks there. All right, we have a quick question from Representative Jackson. Is that?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman,
Yes.
and it's not about this. I've seen some facilities here in Atlanta. It's fine, but you didn't ask for statements regarding the Association for the Blind, and I just wanted to address those issues. We had a delegation that came up for Chatham County 2 weeks ago, and they were concerned as well. We have a Chatham County Association for the Blind. They've been very active for many years, and if we can consider, a study or whatever we can do, I would like to be a part of that. I've worked with them through the years, and surely something can be done to assist them. They came up in a van, and everybody was very gracious to them while they were here.
Yes, and I've met them as well in Chatham County. You're speaking to the previous measure, and yes, I think we've established that we need to discover the degree to which the current agency understands. I'd like to hear from them. I learned of this just a few days ago, as we all did, of this measure, and so we need to discover. Creating a whole new agency of government is not an easy thing to do, so we need to work on it. But we all want to make sure they get the care. Then, any questions for Mr. Bauer before we adjourn? Tom, thank you for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here today. We are adjourned.